All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So, today I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the economics of reproductive efficiency. So, my name is Chris Prevatt. I'm a beef cattle and forage economist at the UF IFAS Range Cattle REC in Ona, Florida. So, our key focus today is going to be on the economic value of reproductive efficiency. So, what we're going to do is we want to calculate what the value is of a 1% increase in weaning percentage or 5% increase in weaning percentage, and just see, how much can we spend to get that next unit of production, which in this case is weaning percentage, and what are some of those what are some of those cost variables that we need to evaluate where we might be spending money on that would help us increase that rate of reproductive efficiency on our operation. So the first thing we really have to do whenever we're thinking about the value of reproduction, everyone, there's a lot of stuff out there in the media that talks about how valuable reproduction is, and absolutely it is valuable. And in a lot of scenarios, it's our most valuable concern in terms of reproductive efficiency. But unless we calculate it, a lot of them are just really throwing numbers around. It's not twice or 3 times as valuable as a lot of other indicators that we would potentially look at here. So the first thing I've done is just try to put things. We have to set some standards here to be able to evaluate changes to our operation. So what we've done here is we've estimated a cow-calf profitability and break-even price. So just for our example, we're going to use the farm that's highlighted there in yellow, just 100 beef cows. Looking at $69,700 in terms of total cow-calf production costs, total cull bull and revenue, total cull bull and cull cow revenue, $9,500 calf production cost per beef cow. So this is going to be both variable and fixed costs of $602 per beef cow. Weaning percentage in this scenario, we evaluated an 87% weaning percentage. Weaning weight, these calves, we wean them at 575 pounds. That is a blended steer and heifer weaning weight. Market price received is $1.40 per pound. Again, it's going to depend greatly on how you're marketing your animals, whether they're in truckload units or if they're single lots. The projected value of gain in this scenario was 75 cents. And estimated profit and loss per beef cow, so it's about $100 per head there in terms of profit per beef cow. Break-even price of $1.20, so there was a net there of about 20 cents a pound in terms of profit per pound there. And total profit for this herd was just under $10,000. So what we're able to do with this information, again, we've set our standards. We're able to evaluate this information because what would a percentage change of these variables, how would that impact this ranch? So what we're going to do is we look at a 1% change, whether that's improvement. So it's a reduction in calf production cost per head. It's a increase in weaning percentage, an increase in weaning weight, and an increase in market price received. We've done the calculations here for this ranch that we evaluated, and we wanted to see what that 1% change would mean. So if we reduced our calf production costs by 1%, so it went from $602 per beef cow to $595 per beef cow, that would be a 1% decline in calf production costs, which is an improvement for us. That would mean that's about $6 a head or $602 for 100 head. And so that's a significant impact that we can have on our cattle operation. Weaning percentage is what we're focusing on here mostly. So what is this 1% weaning percentage going to mean to us? It's going to mean about $8 a head to increase the weaning percentage over 100 beef cows. Increase it by 1%. It's going to be $8 a head. Over 100 head, a 1% increase is going to be $805 per head, per 100 head. In terms of a weaning weight, again, we did this for each variable to be able to understand how important the reproductive efficiency of our cow herd was. 1% increase in weaning weight, that led to 5.75 additional pounds, or $4.31 per head. Again, just to put things in perspective here, so weaning percentage is not twice as important as weaning weight. As the weaning weight over 100 head, if we are able to increase the weaning weight of our cow herd, it would potentially have a $431 increase in profitability there, given that percentage change. Again, on weaning percentage, on weaning weight, again, these are things that we have to assume. This is just on revenue. So we have to assume that cost of production, we were able to keep it stable. We'll get into that in just a second. Then again, we have market price received. This is an extremely important variable. What your calves sell for, what cull cows, cull bulls sell for, extremely important. On market price received, a 1% increase, 1 cent or $1 per hundredweight, so 1 cent per pound or $1 per hundredweight, is the second most important variable to us whenever we think about the impact of our cow-calf operation. $700 over 100 head is kind of the way we need to be thinking about that. So a 1% increase on this cow herd is going to equal about $700 for that market price received. Weaning percentage, again, that 1% increase, it's going to be just over $800 is what that impact is going to be to us. So the value, and just in terms of reproductive efficiency, that value of the first unit that we have here, keeping all else constant, 1% increase in weaning percentage, $800. So extremely important to us. The other variables that you have to really think about is if we're able to keep those cows in the herd longer, we're not putting as much in stress maybe on retaining some of these heifers that are going to take a long time to bring into the herd. Another thing for us to think about there is that there's also that impact of having less cull cows, being able to sell more of our feeder heifers. Feeder heifers have a very good value compared to a lot of those cull cows at times. Now I wanted to get into looking at what that weaning percentage, what does it mean over a little bit larger scale. So a lot of times I like to talk about the state of Florida. So whenever you have data from USDA that allows us to evaluate weaning percentage based on the number of live calves that are expected to be sold from Florida, it generally ranges in that 60 to 65. The last several years has been 62, but over a very long time frame, it typically stays between 55 to 65. So what we've evaluated here is just general numbers based on the data we just looked at. From the farm that we were evaluating there was about 87. So if we just say 85 is our base, the state average is typically on a 100 head operation is about 20,000 less. So they have 20,000 less feeder calf revenue to work with on an annual basis. So over 10 years, we're talking about $200,000 over 10 years, from 85% to the annual average for Florida That is extremely significant and means reproductive efficiency and focusing on the variables that really affect weaning percentage are critical for us. So here, a couple of the takeaways is if we want to increase from 85 to 90 or 85 to 95, those increases are just in terms of reproductive efficiency are going to be a little bit more difficult. The easiest increases are going to be starting from the bottom and moving our way up. We know that. Each move here, each 5% is just over $4,000. So if you look at just feeder calf revenue, just think about that in terms of feeder calf revenue. The 85% we're producing about for 100 head of beef cows here, 85%. We were producing $68,425 in terms of feeder calf revenue. Moving that up to 90%, you move to $72,450 of feeder calf revenue. That's the percentage of the change there, of a percentage change of 5%, or $1 per ranch change there, $4,025. So again, this can be very significant, and that's why a lot of these other videos, they're talking about the management practices. The math just goes with those management practices and focusing on how we can successfully implement practices for reproductive efficiency. So the real take home there was, if we're just looking at 1% change, you're looking at $800. If you're looking at a 5% improvement there of weaning of percentage or reproductive efficiency and improvement of 5%, $4,000 in terms of that increase in weaning percentage that we were able to impact on that herd. So what can producers do? The first takeaway is obviously, we have to scrutinize our operations. We have to evaluate things, go into our books and our records and evaluate some cost of production stuff. So, there's always two sides to this. The first thing we really want to do is just, we don't have to make any changes until we've evaluated our practices. We've discussed it with our county extension agent, with our extension specialist, with some of our neighbors and our veterinarian, kind of what we're doing, ways we can make improvements, but searching for ways to potentially lower that unit cost of production. Is there any waste in there? I think a big key here is more efficient use of inputs. We can increase inputs to get that additional reproductive efficiency, absolutely. But we want to make sure we're using them at their most critical need. Also reducing waste and scrutinizing capital purchases. So capital purchases, things that rust, those are typically going to be more on the high risk side whenever we're looking at increasing reproductive efficiency, taking on more debt with those capital purchases. Anytime we're recommending spending more money, whether that's our own or it's borrowed money, that is increased risk. So we want to have a good solid plan before we move forward here. So what are we going to do to increase weaning percentage? Is it going to be something on the management side? I always recommend focusing and having a written plan as before we move forward here. Where are we spending the money? That's kind of another area that I focus on in terms of budgeting, whether it be for a set of replacement heifers for cow-calf herd. What can we do in terms of evaluating that? So where are we spending the money? I always recommend that we do a budget. We use Quicken, QuickBooks, understanding your cash flows, getting those categories right, understanding where the money's going. So one of the places that I really recommend producers look at is whenever they're evaluating and making a change, let's plug it into a budget. We do have a UF-IFAS cow-calf budget that's available on our Range Cattle REC website. It allows you to plug in some numbers, see where you're spending money at, just try to come up with potentially some of the totals there. So we've in this scenario, one of the major areas that we're spending money on in terms of reproductive efficiency is pastures and forages. In this scenario, there's a lot of leased land. There's a little bit of owned land in this scenario. A lot of different forages throughout the pastures. The key considerations here is, do we have enough acres in terms of allowing these animals to cycle and reproductive efficiency? Do we have the grazing acres? In terms of soil fertility, there's going to be soil fertility inputs in terms of fertilizer and lime costs. There's also those weed controls, and everyone's going to have some different miscellaneous expenses here in terms of pastures and grazing. It may be some electric fence. You just got to evaluate that for your scenario. So this is one of the places that we can potentially use to make a impact on reproductive efficiency. I think where most discussions typically go whenever we think about increasing reproduction is nutrition. And again, that goes along with pastures and forages, but supplemental feedstuffs. Sometimes we're in environments that are a lot of highly lignified, low quality forages. Again, you still may need a little time period there where there is some hay or some baleage. But for the most part, what we're talking about is energy and protein supplements, as well as salt and mineral. So just our budget here allows us to potentially calculate what some of those costs might be. Again, another way for us to use this is to think about, if we're going to increase it 1%, we've got, $8 a head, or for 100 head, we've got $8 a head, or $800 for 100 head, just to get that 1% increase in reproductive efficiency. If we were able to look at it over potentially a 5% increase, we've got $4,000 to play with. That's how much we can spend up to that percentage increase, and that would be that break-even point. So we want to spend less than that, because whenever we increase this, our level of management, take additional risk, we want to make sure we're being paid for those efforts. So again, hay and baleage, just providing some roughage and some dry matter out there when things might be scarce. Energy and protein supplements, a lot of liquid supplementation, and then salt and mineral in terms of having a salt and mineral package, absolutely key there in terms of meeting some nutritional needs. The last thing that just in terms, this is for our typical repro and management school that we have in South Florida. So where are we spending money? Some veterinary medicine needs to come into play in terms of controlling parasites, in terms of flies, dewormers, lice, our general vaccinations in terms of our clostridial and respiratory vaccines. There's also considerations in terms of artificial insemination and estrus synchronization. So again, both of those are absolutely critical. Pregnancy check. We want to evaluate and potentially make some cullings if there's been a cow that just really doesn't fit with what you're trying to do in terms of your calving season. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You have to evaluate and figure out what works best for you. But these are just some of the considerations that we need to make as we're again looking at our budget here. So in summary, whenever we're thinking about this economics of reproductive efficiency, one should always weigh their options and determine what's best for their individual operation. We're all different. We all have different resources and concerns and different levels of management. The answer is obviously going to be based on our individual level of management, our goals, our cow herd, and our level of production costs. So with that, I appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me or the South Florida Beef Forage Group. So with that, I appreciate your time today. Thank you.